There are two types of responses to pressure. One is to perform because you are so stressed out, you are feeling that fight or flight, and you respond, or you fold. You get anxious, you get fearful, and you freeze, and in the moment you come up short. And today we talk about the 13th chapter of Cybernetics, and this is the subject of the chapter. The title is How to Turn a Crisis into a Creative Opportunity. And this chapter really helps me when it comes to performance, when it comes to performance anxiety and calming yourself down in the moment, how to do it, how to, you know, reinforce some of these principles, especially in real time, to help you do your best. Because, you prepare all day long for a quiz, for an exam, for a test, whatever it is. Maybe it's a sports event, maybe you're giving a speech, maybe you're giving a presentation. I don't know what it is, but we all get anxious, we all get fearful in the moment, and it sucks because we prepared so much, we did so much, and for whatever reason we can't get out of our own way. And this is what this chapter is about. And yeah, let's get into it because it's a good one. I know a young golfer who holds the all-time course record for his home course, yet has never even placed in a really big tournament. When playing by himself or with friends or in a small tournament where the stakes are low, his play is flawless. Yet each time he gets into a big tournament, his game deteriorates. In the language of golfdom, the pressure gets him. Many baseball pitchers have pinpoint control until they find themselves in a situation where the chips are down, then they choke up, lose all control, and appear to have no ability whatsoever. On the other hand, many athletes perform better under pressure. The situation itself seems to give them more strength, more power, more finesse. People who come into their own in a crisis. For example, John Thomas, the record-breaking high jumper from Boston University, often performs better in competition than in practice. In February 1960, Thomas set a new world's record, clearing 7 feet 1.25 inches at the U.S. Indoor Championships. His highest previous jump in practice had been 6 feet 9.25 inches. Okay, I'm not going to go through the rest of the anecdotes here because I think you get the point, but we all know those players that when the lights get the brightest, they seem to perform the most. And, you can see this in people in your day-to-day life. Think about the person that, when it comes to the daily tasks, they kind of slack off, but when it really matters, they really, really crunch the numbers. I have a friend that, I don't know if I should say this because I'm kind of outing him, but I have a friend that really, really, really slacks off, but when he has a deadline, he is locked in, and that is all he does. And it's kind of bad because he pushes it all off to the last moment, but he has that weird thing where when he's on death ground, when he has a deadline in front of him, he can really lock in and he can really get the work done. But aside from that, he just slacks off and does whatever he wants. And I don't recommend this, but we all know somebody like this. I figured I would just share that story to kind of give that example. So he gives 3 steps to be able to handle these situations, to be able to handle a crisis, handle these stressful situations. Number 1 is practice without pressure. And this is the idea of get the skills, become acclimated, because when the pressure's on, you want to have the fundamental skills. You want to know what you're doing, because in that moment you can remind yourself, you know what, it's just like practice. You know what, I know what I'm doing. When the time comes, I'll be ready. And that's really what has really, really helped me the most, is understanding that when I reduce the pressure and I just think about the performance, then I can perform. Then I can do what I know I can do. Then my skills will be shown. But when I'm thinking about the result, when I'm thinking about the lights, when I'm thinking about the event and all the spectacle that goes into it, it really stresses me out. But when I bring it back to, you've done this thousands of times, you practiced this X amount of times, you know what you're doing, you just have to do it. You just have to give your best effort, and your best effort will be enough. And in the moment, it always, always benefits me. Fire drills teach crisis conduct in non-crisis situations. People react in the same way. Persons who have to learn how to get out of a burning building will normally require 2 or 3 times as long to learn the proper escape route as they would if no fire were present. Some of them do not learn at all. Overmotion interferes with reasoning processes. The automatic reaction mechanism is jammed by too much conscious effort trying too hard. Something akin to purpose tremor develops, and the ability to think clearly is lost. The ones who do manage somehow to get out of the building have learned a narrow, fixated response. Put them in a different building or change the circumstances slightly, and they react as badly the second time around as the first. So what he's saying here is just you know you have to do something. Just outline it in your head. Just outline the idea, and then when you are under pressure, it's 10 times easier. Think about a presentation. What's the generic advice that you always get? Oh, why don't you just do it out loud? Why don't you run it by yourself? Why don't you do it to another person? It's generic advice. You hear it from everybody, but it truly works. It truly does help to understand where you're going to trip up, to understand the timing of it, where you're going to be at a certain slide in your presentation. How much time has passed? How much time do I need to aim for? Can I have questions? Can I do this? Can I do like all these little details? Once you run it over under no pressure, it becomes so much easier when there is pressure. Shadowboxing for stability. Gentleman Jim Corbett made the word shadowboxing popular. When asked how he developed the perfect control and timing for his left jab, which he used to cut John L. Sullivan, the Boston strong boy, to ribbons, Corbett replied that he had practiced throwing his left at his own image in the mirror more than 10,000 times in preparation for the bout. And if you see any good boxer, any good fighter, you know they're good at shadowboxing, because it just allows you to flow. It allows you to do it at no stakes. It allows you to get comfortable. It's almost like dancing. It's almost like practicing a dance. And then when you come to timing, when you come to sparring, when you come to actually fighting, all that timing, all of that looseness, all of that flow and stability is there. And there's just something that really, really, really engages you, like shadowboxing. And it's the same thing. When you go through the motions, when you go through the first step, when you start thinking about it, when you start outlining it in your mind, whatever it is that you're trying to do becomes 10 times easier when you actually try to do it. Think about going into a project and not planning it out at all. How are you going to get to the end without the plan? But let's say you come up with a really detailed plan, step by step, of what you need to do, and then it's right there in front of you. Then you just follow the steps, and then boom, there you have it. There it is. The project's finished. And it's that little difference. It's going into something blindly or going into something prepared that can make all the difference in whether we feel the pressure or not. Easy practice brings better scores. When Ben Hogan was playing tournament golf regularly, he kept a golf club in his bedroom and daily practiced in private, swinging the club correctly and without pressure at an imaginary golf ball. When Hogan was on the links, he would go through the correct motions in his imagination before making a shot, then depend upon muscle memory to execute the shot correctly. I think a really good example of this is when you're practicing something, have fun with it, experiment things. This is something that you could see very readily in fighting. I'm just going to use this example because it's very close to home for me, but the people that learn the most in jiu-jitsu, the people that learn the most in fighting in general, are the people that don't take practice seriously, the people that have very low stakes, the people that are willing to make mistakes in practice, because you become accustomed to making mistakes. You become accustomed to how to respond when you make a mistake, and then in a tournament, when you make a mistake, you know how to respond. You can get yourself back to a better position. You've been there before. You're comfortable in those bad positions. And, that's really what makes or breaks somebody that learns fighting, is somebody that becomes comfortable in the fire, somebody that becomes comfortable in the stressful situations that most people freak out. Most people use all their energy. Most people put themselves in worse positions because they are afraid. Shadowboxing turns on self-expression. The word express literally means to push out, to exert, to show forth. The word inhibit means to choke off, restrict. Self-expression is pushing out, a showing forth of the powers, talents, and abilities of the self. It means turning on your own light and letting it shine. Self-expression is a yes response. Inhibition is a no response. It chokes off self-expression, turns off, or dims your light. In shadowboxing, you practice self-expression with no inhibiting factors present. You learn the correct moves. You form a mental map, which is retained in the memory, a broad, general, flexible map. Then, when you face a crisis where an actual menace or inhibiting factors present, you have learned to act calmly and correctly. This is a carryover in your muscles, nerves, brain from practice to the actual situation. So again, what he's saying is that just practicing in your head, just going through the motions, just doing the first little step, just outlining the problem, makes it so much easier. The next part of the chapter is dry shooting is the secret of good marksmanship. If you've ever heard anyone talk about guns and somebody that's really good at firing, they talk about dry shooting. I don't feel like getting into it. I don't know that much about it, but just know that it's more so the process of setting up that is more important than the actual performance. How do you frame things in your mind? How do you execute discipline in moments of stress? How do you get every single detail in check so that you could even get to the finish line. Shadowboxing helps you hit the ball. Again, I think all of these ideas are somewhat redundant. Here's when we get into the more interesting stuff. The salesman who practiced not selling. You can use the same technique to hit the ball in selling, teaching, or running a business. A young salesman complained to me that he froze up when calling upon prospects. His one big trouble was his inability to properly reply to the prospect's objection. When a prospect raises an objection or criticizes my product, I can't think of a thing to say at the time, he said. Later, I can think of all kinds of good ways to handle that objection. I told him about shadowboxing and the kid who learned to bat by letting the ball go by with the bat on his shoulder. I pointed out to hit a baseball or to think on your feet requires good reflexes. Your automatic success mechanism must respond appropriately and automatically. Too much tension, too much motivation, too much anxiety for results jams the mechanism. You think of the proper answers later because you're relaxed and the pressure is off. Right now, your trouble is not responding quickly and spontaneously to the objections your prospects throw at you. In other words, you're not hitting the ball at. Right now, your trouble is you're not responding quickly and spontaneously to the objections your prospects throw at you. In other words, you're not hitting the ball that the prospect throws you. I told him, first of all, to practice a number of imaginary interviews, actually walking in, introducing himself to a prospect, making a sales pitch, and then imagining every possible objection, no matter how screwballish, and answering it out loud. Next, he was to practice with his bat on his shoulder. On an actual live client, he was going to go in with an empty gun. As far as interest, intents, and purpose were concerned, the purpose of the sales interview would not be to sell. He had to resign himself to being satisfied with no order. The purpose of the call would be strictly practice bat on the shoulder, empty gun practice. In his own words, the shadowboxing worked like a miracle. As a young medical student, I used to shadowbox surgical operations on cadavers. This is no pressure practice taught me much more than technique. It taught a future surgeon calmness, deliberateness, clear thinking, because he had practiced all these things in a situation that was not do or die, life or death. Okay. I don't know why I couldn't read that at a certain point. But what he's talking about here is super fascinating, because he's saying that this salesman had all the skills to sell people. He had all the answers. It's just in the moment of pressure, in the moment of stress, he couldn't find the answers. He couldn't find the words. And simply what this was is he was overthinking it. He was trying to sell instead of trying to do what he knew how to do. Because when you think about the end goal, when you think about the results, then you think about the steps that precede it. You think about the things that can go wrong. And immediately your mind freezes because there's so many outlooks. There's so many things that can happen. You got to roll with the punches. You got to see what happens. When the situation arises, when the objection comes that you can answer, then you answer it. But when you become petrified of fear, when you become petrified of what is going to happen, then you cease to be able to act because you're worrying about everything else except what is in front of you. How to make your nerves work for you. The word crisis comes from a Greek word which means literally decisiveness or point of decision. A crisis is a fork in the road. One fork holds promise of a better condition, the other of a worse condition. In medicine, the crisis is a turning point where the patient either gets worse and dies or gets better and lives. Hugh Casey was one of the most successful and calmest relief pitchers of all time. Was once asked what he thought of when he sent into a game in the middle of a crisis situation. I always think about what I'm going to do and what I want to happen, he said, instead of what the batter is going to do or what may happen to me. He said he concentrated on what wanted to happen, felt that he could make it happen, and that he usually did. Okay, and what he's saying here is very important, because you can only control your own response. You can't control what other people do. So you worrying about what other people are going to do, how you should react, all these other things, you can't control it. Just think about doing your best. Just think about the things that you can bring to the table and then try to do it. And imagine yourself having already done it so that you feel worthy, and just go into a problem armed with those two ideas. And I think if you approach a situation this way, you're going to do amazing things. So the second thing to do in a crisis is crisis brings power. Neurologist J.A. Hadfield has made an extensive study in the extraordinary powers, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, which come to the aid of ordinary men and women in a time of crisis. There's a lot of stuff. I'm not going to read all of it because I feel like we're going to be here for another 2 hours, but essentially, your mind has the capabilities to unlock your nervous system in stressful times. Think about it this way. your brain, your body, your just general regulation systems in your body don't use all of your energy at once because it's a self-preservation mechanism. It doesn't give you access to all of the potential you have inside of you, because if you did, if you were constantly under immense stress, one, it wouldn't be good for you, but two, you would expend all of your energy. You wouldn't have anything for the next day. You would have to eat a lot of food. You would have to have constant upkeep. So the mind is about conservation. The nervous system is about conservation. So in these heightened moments of stress, we have access to more potential than we otherwise would. And to some people, this is very terrifying because there's all of this energy, there's all of this emotion, and some people freeze. This is what you hear: fight, flight, or freeze. This is that idea of you need to do something, and some people are just overwhelmed by these more primitive states of consciousness or our nervous system, whatever you want to say. Keep your goal in mind. The essence of this aggressive attitude is remaining goal-oriented. You keep your own positive goal in mind. You intend to go through the crisis experience to achieve your goal. You keep the original positive goal and do not sidetrack into secondary ones. Again, you think about what you want to do, you think about what you can do, and then you approach the situation that way. When something goes wrong, when the response comes, then you act. But until it happens, you're just going to get yourself off track. You're just going to distract yourself. And if you're not singular on a single purpose, if you're not singular on a single idea, then you are not going to be able to give it your best effort. Don't mistake excitement for fear. Many people have made the mistake of habitually interpreting the feeling of excitement as fear and anxiety, and therefore interpreting as proof of inadequacy. Think about when you're nervous. It's not necessarily that you're afraid. It's not necessarily that you don't feel like you can do it. It's just you know that the stakes are high. You know that there's some level of performance you have to give, and it's excitement. Start feeling it as excitement, and it will completely change your outlook on things. 3, what is the worst that can possibly happen? And I think this is a really, really important thing, because a lot of the things that we tell ourselves, a lot of the things that we think will go wrong are just imaginary scenarios in our head that aren't quite true. Because when something goes wrong, you immediately think it to be the worst case scenario. You immediately are going through the permutations of what could go wrong, of what's going to happen, of the consequences of each of these things. And until it becomes actualized, until it is right in front of you, I don't think it's beneficial to spend any time on something that isn't real. And this is really what we do to ourselves, is when we have this anxiety, when we have this fear, when we have this stressful moment, we always take it to the extreme. We always take it to, well, if I don't do good in this, then I'm not going to get this or this or this. Like we always build it up to be worse than it is. As Seneca said, we suffer more in our own minds than we do in reality. Everything that we build up in our head is far worse than it actually is if we face it, and we face it with a smile, and we face that problem with the realization that in every failure is the seed of victory. In every failure, we learn something about what we can do better next time. That is the essence of this book. That is the essence of life. That is the essence of overcoming your past version of yourself to become something better. Understand that whatever it is that's going to happen to you is not as bad as you think it is. You can face it. You can deal with it. You've dealt with worse, and you will deal with worse. And this is just another stepping stone for you to be who you are meant to be. I think that's the rest of the chapter. Let me just make sure. Yeah, I think we're just going to end it there, because I think I ended up fairly strong, and I think I got all the major points across. But again, Cybernetics is a tremendous book. I really enjoy talking about this. I really enjoy going through the chapters in depth with you guys. There will be a playlist at the end of this with all of the parts included. And I actually just did a video a few days ago of like a compilation of about half of the book that I've gone through so far. So that'll be one of the cards at the end of this video. But yeah, with that said, I love you guys so much. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for making it about 20 minutes into a video where I am just rambling, talking about books that I enjoy. It's always awesome to see that people are interested. And that said, I love you guys so much. Thank you guys. Peace out. Catch you in the next one.